I have spoken several times in the state of Montana. I speak all over the country. Montana is a state that's, last time I was there, the stats I was given were that Montana is 93% white, almost 7% Native American, and then the like 0.00 whatever percent that's left is the rest of us, including people who look like me. So my joke when I go to Montana is they change the population stats when I cross the state line. You know what I mean? And I've spoken in Montana a number of times, which is one of the poorest states in the country. It's right down there with Mississippi and some other states for infant mortality, for how low the wages are, for how people are struggling to get through. And one of the things I hear in Montana when people are enraged, as they ought to be enraged, about the lack of support for decent public policy on health care. The fact that they've got to work 2 or 3 jobs to afford to feed their families, to afford to take care of their kids and their families. The fact that their public schools are struggling for funding because there isn't enough money. The fact that they and most of the population have attitudes toward when we ought to go to war and when we ought not to go to war, and Washington is not paying attention at all to how they feel, particularly when they're sending their kids over there to die, and most of our senators and congresspersons are not. Then I go to, so I'm in Montana, where people are enraged about these things that are screwing with their lives. And one of the things I hear again and again and again is, we got to stop underwriting those illegal immigrants. We got to stop underwriting those Hispanic and black welfare mothers in Chicago who are cheating our government out of money that ought to be spent on working people. We got to stop coddling the terrorists and coddling, it's all of this other stuff of who's to blame with what's wrong with their lives. Then I go to Harlem. I go to New York City and I speak in Harlem, where people are enraged because guess what? They got to work 2 and 3 jobs to try to support their family. Unemployment in their community is sky high. Drugs, just as in Montana, you might be surprised at how, like the #1 public health problem in Montana, killing young kids, is drugs. It's drugs. Drug addiction, drug abuse. Same thing in Harlem. In Harlem, the complaint is, you know, we need community policing that's really oriented toward the community instead of treating the community as an enemy to get a handle on drugs. We need drug treatment. We need money for drug treatment. We need money for public schools. We need health care that people can afford. We need a living wage. So a black woman in Harlem will stand up and say to me, and the reason why we don't have all these things in Harlem that we need as a community is the white man, right? And I'm saying to her, and I'm saying to the guy in Montana, you know what? I got a woman in Harlem I want you to talk to. And I'm saying to the woman in Harlem, you know what? I got a guy in Montana outside of Bozeman who I want you to talk to. Because when you ask either one what they want, they say the same thing. It's the same list of things. And the only thing that gets in the way of their getting those things that they want, that gets in our way of our getting the things that we want, is the fact that we blame one another for our not getting them, instead of blaming who we ought to be blaming for why we don't have what we want, which is a very, very small group of extraordinarily wealthy and influential congresspersons, senators, and CEOs who are making the decisions that drive American domestic and foreign policy. That's what's getting in our way. And bigotry is the big brick wall that keeps Hispanic voters alienated from black voters, alienating from white voters, alienated from gay voters, alienated from straight voters, alienated from Catholic, Jewish, Muslim voters, all down the line. We got to do something about this. One of the reasons that I wrote this book, in fact, the reason that I wrote Race Matters for the 21st Century, is to give us a way to talk straight to one another. to tell the truth to one another while respecting one another at the same time. And if we were left to our own devices to do that, we'd be able to do it. The problem is there's all this artificial junk in the way. When a white woman from suburban Cleveland gets in the face of a black male from downtown Baltimore, and they get in one another's faces with exactly contradictory accounts of who the police are, right? The black guy from Baltimore or LA says, I'll tell you who the police are. They're people who run through our community and treat us as enemies, whether we're law-abiding citizens or not. They're people who don't differentiate between the people who are doing right and doing wrong in our community. There are people who plant drugs on people. There are people who take bribes because I've seen them do it. There are people who disrespect us. There are people who treat our community as if it's an enemy and they're the invading army. That's who the police are. And when a white woman from suburban Cleveland says, no, I'm sorry, I'll tell you who the police are. The police are hard-working men and women who lay their lives on the line every day to do a tough job to protect our property and our cars and our lives and to do their best in a tough situation to look out for us. And I've never had a policeman treat me with anything like what you're talking about. I've never seen it. I don't think it happens. And I think you're just playing victim, and I'm sick of hearing it. When she gets in his face about that, the problem isn't that the woman from Cleveland or the black guy from LA or Baltimore is lying. That's not the problem. The problem is they're both telling the truth. That's the problem. That's what we've got to understand. And that's got to be the point of departure for how we learn to face one another and talk with respect. I need to stop. I thank you so much for your attention.